Hey everybody, how's it going today? Today I am going to go through what I did on my project that I worked on through the summer. Basically it's a 1988 Sportster, and I just wanted to kind of take you guys through everything that was done to it. And if I'm smart enough, I will put some before and after pictures at the end of this video. But before I get into it, I just want to make sure that I say that this was not made to be a show bike. It was just made to basically be a little bit of a fun bike to just boot around town, kind of a bar hopper thing. So does it need more work? Oh, probably yes. But I've got it to where I got it right now, and really that's all I need for right now. So anyway, I'm going to take you through it. So let's get to it. So the first thing I'll say about this bike is it's like a lot of the women I date. It looks good from afar, but it's probably far from good. But let's get started, and let's start with the front. So the first thing that got done was basically the fork seals, because these things were leaking quite a bit. Actually, the dealership did that. So those got done, but obviously I took and I chopped the front fender. I took probably about 5 inches off the front and about 6 off the back. Nothing fancy, and basically it's just a spray bomb paint job. You can probably tell it's not the greatest, but it does what it needs to do. And as we come up, one of the other problems we had was with the risers. And the bushings that are up in here and on the top, they were right shot. So I replaced those with some new Arlen Ness ones. I also gave the risers a good shot of trim clad just to brighten them up a bit. Now, as we come to the engine, there wasn't a whole lot major done. The engine still runs pretty good for being a 1988 with unknown mileage on it. But one thing I did do is I pulled the cam cover off, and I also had the cams out. So that was resealed, and I also retimed the engine. So other than that, this is a new carb on here. And the old carb that was on there was about 30 some years old, and it leaked. And it leaked no matter what you did. So I thought I'll just put in a brand new carb and be done with it. Now the issue with this one was I got it from Dennis Kirk, and it was supposed to fit a 1988 Sportster. And if you look at it, it looks like it does. However, it was these brackets, or this bracket here I should say, that holds the throttle cables. The bracket that was on there that came with the new carb was too high and actually didn't fit. So this bracket here I had to take off of the old carb and kind of modify it a little bit to work on this one so it would actually fit. Also, the old carb did not have this little pump on it either. So that's new, as well as this air cleaner, which is basically just a really cheap air cleaner. Nothing special at all about that. It was just cheap, and this was done on a budget. Now the exhaust is new on this bike as well. New nuts, new studs, new gaskets, new pipes. And these are also a cheap set of pipes. And if you're going to buy cheap, there's one thing you're going to find out, and that is that it doesn't always fit. Now again, this was supposed to fit a 1988 Sportster, and as you can see, it doesn't even come close to fitting a 1988 Sportster. So I had to just fabricate that little link there. It holds fine. It just looks a little different, but it just adds to its charm, I guess. Now coming to the foot pegs, on either side, these foot pegs were actually the passenger pegs, which used to be down there. But I actually hacked those off, moved them up here because the pegs that were on there already were pretty ratched, and then I just bought a cheap set of highway pegs just to put up front. Also on this, as you'll see, that's a new cover, as that was also smashed down around here. It was all cracked to hell, so had to replace that as well. Now the oil tank is still the same, it's just the stock tank. However, it did have a pretty bad leak, so when I took it off, I cleaned it all up, and actually the problem was just the hose for draining the oil. It was just held on with a really crappy spring clamp, which didn't really work much at all. So I just replaced the clamps, cleaned it all up, put it back on, works fine now. Now, as you'll notice on this bike, it has no back suspension. It is now a hardtail, so to speak. I just basically took off the shocks that were on there and just put in these struts. It's definitely nothing fancy, but you know what? I always kind of wanted a hardtail. Never had one before. I actually don't like the look of the shocks on the outside. I like the look of a hardtail, or a soft tail for that matter. So I just went ahead with this, and actually it's a lot more comfortable than you might think, to be honest with you. And as we come up here, you can see that I cut this fender as well. I probably took off a good foot off the back of it. It was actually somewhere around here. It was all cracked to hell, almost about halfway through. So that was a pretty easy fix, to just take that off and hack it out. Also, as you can see, I installed a couple of new signal lights. The old ones were the wrong color apparently, and they were cheap, and they actually fell apart when I took them off. So just threw these guys on, ran the wires through there, and they work perfect. Now we come to the back, and you can see I installed a new tail light. Again, nothing too exciting. It's a fairly common tail light that you see on a lot of bobbers and choppers. 3 wires, pretty easy to install. So it works perfectly as well, and you've got your obviously your license plate holder right there as well. Now as we come over to the other side, you can see I ran the vent just down around there, kind of tucked it out of the way. This plate I had off, obviously cleaned it up, painted it, got a new battery. I had the whole case off. It was actually cracked. The mounts were cracked. I had to repair those, and of course just put a little paint on it, made it look a little bit nicer. Now we're going to come to the electrical. So we put in a new coil, we've got new wires, new plugs, obviously. I did cut the bracket up here just a bit, just so it sat higher off the top of the engine, because it was sitting almost directly on there. Also, as you can see, all this wiring was all hanging out. I went through it, I cleaned it up, I just basically just loomed it and ran it all the way back, but it was a pretty big mess when I got it. I had to pretty much clean up everything, tighten everything down. Of course, I didn't go crazy with anything too fancy. I just loomed it. That's really all it needed, just for a bar hopper bike. Not really a big deal. The other thing I did was I wired in a new ignition switch. The one that was on there before, basically you had to kind of guess where neutral was on that. Not too good. Also hooked the choke back up, which was just hanging off before. And yeah, just basically cleaned her up and went through it. Now at the very front of the bike, you can see I took off that little visor over the headlight, and I actually just, I basically just chopped it. I cut it. I really do not like the look of that visor on a Sportster. And the other thing I did was I hooked up the speedometer, which actually wasn't hooked up at all. And luckily it was still in operating order. Now, as you can see, this is a completely different seat than the stock one that was on here before. I got rid of that. This is just a cheap little alligator seat. Again, there's no, there's nothing underneath there. It basically just, you know, opens up into a big mess of wires. So it's nothing fancy, but is actually more comfortable than you would actually think. Now, one of, if not the most expensive part that I bought for this bike was probably the gas tank. This is a Frisco tank that I got from Lowbrow Customs. I can't remember exactly how much it cost, but it cost several $100 at least. With the tank, I also bought the mounts for it so it would fit, and also a new petcock. I ran a new fuel line, and then of course I just gave it the spray bomb treatment. Nothing too exciting, but I really like the way it sits on the bike. Just kind of sits on top of the frame. So I was happy with the way that turned out. So that's more or less basically the most of the things that I did. There's probably some stuff I left out. Obviously, I did a little paint touch up on the frame, things like that. A little bit of wiring here and there, maintenance things like adjusting the chain, lubing it, changing all the fluids, things like that. That was all done. I also had the rocker box covers off, made sure everything was good there. One thing I will mention on the tank, if you're getting a new tank, good idea to have it pressure tested and lined, which I did with this one as well. So yeah, but I kind of like the way it turned out. With the struts on the back there, it dropped the ass end probably anywhere between 2 to 3 inches, and then with the small seat and that tank that sits right on top of the frame, I like the way it looks. I like its stance. It almost gives it that little bit of a chopper feel without it actually being a, you know, quote unquote chopper. But that's about it. That's what I did. That's kind of what I did through most of the summer other than rides. So hope you liked the video. If you did, like, share, subscribe, and I'll leave you with a few before and after pictures. So until I see you again, take it easy.